enjoying your blended family. We are excited today on this episode. We have a special guest with us. We're talking marriage here. We're talking about the
Mhm.
reality, a perfect marriage. We're talking a perfect marriage
Like
today.
ours.
I mean,
Yes.
everybody's trying to achieve that perfect marriage. So we're going to
Yeah.
dive a lot into that. And what does that really look
We're
like?
gonna tell
Is
you
that
how to have an exact perfect
there you
marriage.
go. So you're going to want to stay tuned.
Yeah.
Well, we're so excited to have Dr. Alyson Nerenberg with us today. Just to kind of let you know who she is, she's a licensed clinical psychologist. She's got 30 years of clinical expertise and training. She's been featured on ABC, NBC, Fox, among a lot of others. And she's the author of her new book, No Perfect Love, Shattering the Illusion of Flawless Relationships. So we are so excited. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I'm really glad to be here and talking with you both.
Yes, when I saw your book and I was like reading the byline on there and the title, I was just like, okay, this is something that our blended family, our community needs, because this is an issue that I had to work through myself, of this illusion of what relationships and marriage should look like, especially for people going into their second marriage. So we are so glad to have you on today and talking. We joked in the introduction about perfect relationships, but really it's shattering that there is not a perfect love, a perfect relationship. And so we're going to have you talk more on that. We have a lot of good questions that I know are going to just bring so much value and probably really take a lot of people's mindset and maybe shift it from what they have had in their mind, like it says on here, that illusion of what they've been searching for this whole time. But before we get into all of that, we want to know just a little bit more about you. Like, we're a blended family. We have 4 kids. We live here in Texas. Like, tell us a little bit about your family dynamics. You're married, how long you've been married, where you call home.
You are asking me this on the right day.
Oh,
So you really are. Today is my 26th wedding anniversary.
Wow,
oh,
that is
yes.
exciting.
Yes, and I'm celebrating it with you guys. Kind of
Yes,
Wow,
thank you.
we feel special.
Yes, I feel honored. We should have like
Yeah, we
brought a
should have
cake
like
or
had a
something.
cake,
Yeah.
party
yeah.
hats, and everything, like a little bird.
It
Yeah,
really is to be married that long. It is a huge accomplishment.
Yes,
I'm
congrats.
really proud of it. It's, and I'm not telling you it's perfect or that in all days it's wonderful, but I'm in it. And
Yeah.
I'm in it and I'm living it. And I have 3 kids. So we've been married 26 years. We've been together 28. And my oldest child is 22 years old. It's my daughter. And then I have another daughter who's 20. And then we had a struggle in our marriage because I wanted a third child. My husband wasn't so sure. He was like, we have 2 busy careers. I don't know if we can handle it. And I just dreamed about having this little boy. And I knew he'd be a boy. And it was kind of a struggle in our marriage that it took a little time for my dream to happen. But we were on the same page. And finally, we decided to try. And we have a son who is turning 12 next month.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not a blended family, same husband, but I have a big gap between, a 20-year-old, a 22-year-old, and an almost 12-year-old.
Sure. Yeah. And
Challenge.
that can have some challenges within it. I know kind of me coming from a blended family. I have a sister that we have 15 years difference. And so yeah, it is just that gap. It's challenging to kind of really navigate through that.
So on some days it's great, and he has 3 moms. He has me, and he has his 2 sisters. And
I'm
there's
sure
a
he
lot
loves
of
that.
yeah. Oh, well, he loves his sisters. He really does. But then on the other days, he's like an only child, and they're both off in the world, in college and leaving him.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of hellos and goodbyes, and it's hard in some ways, and
Yeah.
especially having had 2 daughters, all of a sudden to have a son, it's a different energy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no doubt. Yeah, so that's amazing. We always love to hear the everybody who comes on their family dynamics because there's so many, we talk in a blended family community, everybody's different and everybody has their own challenges. and just connections, beauty, everything that kind of comes with it. So we always love engaging in that.
Yeah, and it's been great because my husband has risen to the challenge. I mean, the two of them are thick as thieves. They're really close, and what I like about the two of you, from what I've known already, is that you're very spiritual, and
Yes.
having the son was something I prayed for a very long time
Yes.
and
Oh,
hope
yes.
believe. So I'm really thrilled to have the three kids, but there's days that it's not so easy.
Yeah. I imagine, and our kids are older now, and our youngest is 19 and our
Yeah.
oldest is 24. And it really they don't grow, I mean, there's still the challenges and the struggles,
Yes.
having a 22 and a 20-year-old, but you
Yes.
wouldn't trade it for the world. And so no, love that, and love that
Yeah.
God answered those prayers for you, and that y'all have the son now yeah, I know that that's a special bond that you have. That's just amazing. Amazing story. I'd
It
love to
is.
hear that.
Yeah, it's been great, but it's also, as anything that's really wonderful also has some challenges and some struggles, and and being an older mom now, I went from being a much
Mm.
younger mom to being older parents, and with my girls, they had each other, so they had best friends already with themselves, and for my son, it's a little different. We're a little bit out of the
Yeah.
loop with parenting as opposed to we haven't done it in a while with her young. It's been challenging in some ways.
For sure,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, it sounds like you have a beautiful family, 26 years. That is amazing. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
We love hearing that. And kind of diving into your book, because we are talking marriage.
Yes.
And, marriage, being a blended family community, there's so many families that are coming from divorce, and they're coming in saying, okay, well, my marriage didn't work out, that something went wrong. There could be a number of factors why that went wrong, but now I found the love of my life, and we married again, and this is going to be it. This is going to be it. But then some of the challenges and struggles start happening, and it's so easy in marriage to really, so just let that start putting those wedge between you. And especially being a blended family, we have a lot more baggage that we can bring into a marriage along with that. And we do kind of come with that illusion of, well, this is going to be the perfect marriage. I found the perfect one. And
Mhm.
then once you have your first argument, you're like, wait a minute, you know, what's
Right.
going on here? I thought you were perfect. I thought this was going to work. But
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
talk in your first chapter, you talk about no perfect love. You talk about narcissism and perfection. Could you maybe break that down, and what you're talking about there? What does that mean?
Yes. I put them together because I find that they work together. They're pretty interwoven. And the definition for narcissism I used is a little different than the typical one you hear. I talked about Arnold Rothstein, who was a famous psychoanalyst, and what he had said was that narcissism is the unrelenting pursuit of perfection.
Mm.
Okay, I like
It's
that.
I am looking for that perfect wife, or I am looking for that perfect husband, or that perfect therapist, or
Yeah.
that perfect child. It's also there's a lack of accountability. If you're looking for your partner to be perfect, you don't have to do the internal work. You'll
Mm,
just
Mm.
find somebody who'll get you 24 hours a day and understand you. Well, that's really not possible.
yeah. Yeah, and I could see that someone with kind of that mindset that's always looking for that perfection, we're never going to achieve that. I mean, there is no perfect person except Jesus Christ that walked this earth. There is no perfect person out there. We all have mistakes. We all think differently and stuff like that. So I could only imagine that someone who has that narcissistic mindset that's looking for that perfection and it's never met, that it throws them off. They're like, wait a minute, what's happening?
And I look at it that we all have a little bit of it. We
Yeah,
all want to find that perfect person, or, it throws us off when somebody disappoints us.
yeah.
We look for that perfect friend or that perfect relationship that's going to heal us or help us. And when we are disappointed, that's where the real work comes in.
Yeah.
And, and I call it the ruptures and repairs. Because,
Ruptures and repairs. I like
yes,
that.
in any long-term relationship, there's going to be ruptures.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is disappointments, when you feel let down or hurt. And the repair work is how you work through it.
Yeah.
That's the real work.
Yeah, for sure. And knowing how to work through it,
Yeah.
I would imagine a lot of us, especially in marriages and stuff, we don't know how to work. We're all kind of like amateur lovers in a sense. We're coming together and trying to figure marriage out, or trying to figure each other out, and what does that look like, and how do I do that?
Well, we want to cut and run when our feelings get hurt.
Mm,
We
Mhm.
yeah,
think, all right, you know what? This person isn't right. I'm out of here. I don't want to be hurt.
yeah.
The challenge is to take our own inventories and look at what's our piece here.
Oh, I love that. Take our own inventories.
Yeah. So, what do you think that we each have that, like, where does that come from? That need for perfectionism or narcissism that's, you said, is in each of us, at some level. Where does that come from?
Well, it starts in childhood. If you think about it, we're fed this. We're fed the illusions of fairy tales. I'm going to find my Prince Charming and move off to the castle and live happily ever after.
Mhm.
Yeah, those fairy tales, yeah, told to us at early ages, right?
And then after that, we hear romantic comedies where it's, the protagonist just has to make it through this misunderstanding and then lives happily ever after.
Yeah,
Or
Yeah.
even on TV shows, if we look at even Sex in the City, where so much of it is, four women coming together and talking about finding the perfect man, or The Bachelor, it turns finding perfection into a competition.
yeah.
Hmm.
It really kind of glamorizes it in a sense, falsifies it to where, yeah, we're chasing after that dream, or that yeah, what we think is really perfection, but it's not. It's a false sense of hope, really.
Yeah, when I think as believers too, we think, this soulmate and God has somebody in store for us out there. And I believe in a sense that God does have someone that, in mind for you. But at the same time, when you come together with another human being, like, it's not going to be perfect. Like, having that companionship doesn't mean that they're going to line up with every single thing. A lot of times it is that oppositeness in there, right?
Oh, yes, and we're brought up with our own struggles. Nobody has the same family background, so we all look at the world differently and see things differently, and, there's that shame that if I'm not good enough, or if because of my family was a blended family, or was it had addictions in the family, or there was a death, or there was a loss, that I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. So I better have perfect. If I don't feel good enough about who I am, if I feel shame, I better have this perfect marriage. And
Yeah,
then you look at Instagram and Facebook, and it seems like
Mhm.
everybody's marriage is perfect.
yeah.
I had that pressure today. I had a radio show. I knew I was coming here, and I had to get my son to his tennis camp. I was running all over. And I'm like, oh, I got to post for my husband for our anniversary, and it's just like, it's that pressure that if you don't feel enough, that feeling that you're less than, or that you have FOMO, that everybody else has it easier.
And that can I also, I guess that can push, you're actually self-sabotaging in a sense, because now you're pushing your partner away, but really it's because of the feelings that you have going on inside. Is that correct?
It is, and I look at it that we all carry traumas,
Mm,
whether they're big T traumas or little t traumas. So a big T trauma could be if you lose a parent at an early age, if you're suffering with an illness, if you're in a plane crash or a car crash, but there are all those little T traumas of feeling picked last for a sport, feeling, emotionally abused or neglected by a parent, and all the losses. And there's so much of that trauma that we carry with us, and that we look for our partner to tell us that it's all going to be okay.
yeah. So we look
Yeah.
for that affirmation, but yeah, we're relying on them to confirm that with us. And yet when
Mhm.
they don't, we feel let down because now they didn't meet our needs, because they really didn't even know our needs, what we
Yeah.
needed.
When
Exactly.
I think you use the analogy from the Jerry Maguire movie, right? In the book, where it's the whole "you complete me" mindset, and you're looking for that person to complete you.
Yeah, yes, but that makes sense. But it's that when you're not feeling enough, you feel like you need to be completed. And if you think about it, not only are we putting pressure on our spouses, but we're also putting pressure on our children to
Mm,
be
yeah,
perfect. It
yeah,
used to be that our son could be on a soccer team, but now it's like, oh, is he in travel soccer? Or,
Yeah.
it's not enough for our daughter to be on a dance team, but it has to be, is she the front row? And is it like, it's that expectation of having it all look perfect.
Yeah.
hmm We fell into that trap a lot just early on. Just we came from divorce, and we both in the process, found our relationship with Christ during that. And then we met each other. I had been, like you were praying for your son, I was praying for a godly man, to bring this guy into my life that would create this relationship, this envisionment that I had for my future that was destroyed, after my first marriage, and that ended. And so when God sent him into my life, I was like, oh, here we go. I got that Prince Charming here, and everything's going to be perfect and great. And we came together, and I tried. I don't know that he was like cognitively, I don't think either one of us were cognitively trying, but we were trying to have this family that we thought was normal and perfect and the good Christian. We just wanted to do the right thing. We wanted to live by the rules that the Bible says, and like raise this family the way that we felt like we were supposed to. And in the process, like you're saying, it was so much pressure on our kids, on each other, that we couldn't live up to. And then when you start like crashing into that, you're like, oh crap, maybe this wasn't the right person. Maybe I shouldn't have, jumped into something, because it's icky feeling now, like it's having this pushback in our relationship. And so I think that so many people, when they come face to face with that, and they're like, dang it, I married the wrong person the first go round, and now I married the wrong person again. Okay, maybe third time's a charm. And you talk about that in the book as well. And you talk about like why we should stay, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like when we come to these situations and things aren't perfect, what's the reasons we should stay?
My number one reason is I feel like life is so complicated and at times really difficult. And it's really nice to have a witness to your life.
Hmm.
As we're on this big adventure, on this ride, to have somebody sitting next to us, seeing our life, seeing us and being with us in the experience. I feel like we all deserve a witness to our lives.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
That is so good. And yeah, it really is. It's one of those that we see this so often in the blended family community, that you leave a marriage, all this baggage, you find somebody that you love again. You're like, okay, let's give marriage a try because I really love this person. And then you run into all the challenges, and that can be the common theme that's in your head. It's like, okay, this isn't going to work out either. Let me just bail on this one. And the what we see over and over again is whenever you do that, now you're adding more baggage to it. So the next marriage you go into is going to be even more baggage and more trauma. I love how you had put it earlier, that whenever you have that narcissism or perfectionism that's inside of each and every one of us, it's really a cause to push away from the self work, the working on ourselves. Could you explain maybe what does that look like to really reflect on yourself? Because I think if we could do that, we can overcome a lot of the marriage issues that we might have.
So at the end of each of my chapters in the book, it's really about looking at your patterns, looking at what was the story in your family before you were even born? What is the trauma you've carried? What is your part? And I often recommend going to a therapist or
Mm.
talking to somebody trusted in the church or in your a close friend, and really doing your own work to look at what your piece is,
Yeah.
so that you don't just keep repeating the same trauma and drama with a different partner.
And then if you jump off too soon, then you're just repeating this exact same thing with somebody else, and you never get to the beauty of it, right? Because the same issues are going to come up. You're just going to have a different face there along with you. So I like how you were saying that too. That's so beautiful to have somebody that just goes along this ride with you. Because that's where, when all the struggles started coming up with our kids in our blended family during the teenage years, And we just found ourselves here. It was just him and I, that we had to lean on each other like never before, where we were so busy doing all the things like you were talking about before, raising our kids, running from practice to here and there, all the things like coaching the teams, we were all in. And then all of a sudden it was just him and I. And instead of us fighting, thank God, during that time, we came and we connected during that time. And so when we made it through that, it's just like, oh man, we can make it through anything.
Yes, yes. And
Yes.
it's such a beautiful experience to make it through something together and to really enjoy each other. My
Yes.
husband and I play tennis togetger, and he's way better than I am. But when we
Oh,
play,
same.
we have these moments that when we win a match, that it's the two of us, and or that we're doing this, or we're trying, and we enjoy hanging out, which is
Yes.
so much a part of life. And we like to do that as much with our kids as possible. And during the pandemic, we became master hikers. We just hiked all the time because there was nothing
Mm,
else to really do. So we would
yeah.
Yes.
take the dog and take the kids and just go outside in nature and just figured it out. And our kids started rolling their eyes, "Oh, another hike." But it was something that we enjoyed to do together.
Yes. Yeah, we're such a big believer in finding those common interests. And whenever you're doing that, you're bonding over fun, you're bonding over experience. And it creates just such deeper connections between you and that other person. So love that. Yeah, that was something you talk about playing tennis. We discovered that because we wanted to find more things we could do together. And
Yeah.
tennis was one of them. And we get out there and
Yeah.
we just have a blast.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
And I'm not very athletic, but for some reason, the way tennis is created, like it doesn't scare me. The same like other sports kind of
Yeah.
scare me. I feel like I have more control in tennis, but I have yet to beat him. The day that I finally do is going to be a glorious day. So, do you ever actually beat your husband in
Oh,
tennis?
never. Absolutely never. But it's something that my whole family does. So I got into it after being the tennis mom who was at all my daughter's matches, hanging on to every point. So I was like, all right, I don't want to become this competitive parent. I better do it myself and have some fun with it.
Yes.
So,
Nice.
Yeah,
but
love that.
yeah, but I think in all relationships, it's the illusion of it being perfect and easy. It's not true.
Yeah.
We all have struggles. We all have good days and bad days and moments that are hard. And it's, what I really advocate is sticking and staying through the hard moments.
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of one of those that we've seen every challenge that has come up, every issue that's come up in our marriage. Whenever we lock arms and we say, you know what, even if we're not seeing eye to eye, we still find ways to hear each other and communicate and come up with a common solution. That every time we do that, it brings us closer together.
Yeah.
It now it's like our marriage now, from having worked through all these blended family challenges and stuff that we have, now where we're at is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's like our relationship is stronger than it's ever been because
Yeah.
we stayed the course and stayed together and said, divorce is not an option for us. We're going to make this work. And now it's like you see the beauty from that. So, so yeah, no, and I bet you could attest, being married 26 years, y'all been through some stuff.
Oh, we have. I remember early on in the marriage when the going got tough, I was like, I'm out of here
Yeah.
because I was hurt. And when my
Mhm.
feelings got hurt, I want to run. And
Yeah.
I'm a sulker. I had to work on myself. And part of doing that with my husband is we had to kind of make up a rule that we're not using that as an out because
Yeah.
it was re-traumatizing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and in the book, you talk about there are certain situations that you go through that not necessarily that you go straight and go, get a lawyer and get divorced, but there
Yeah.
are like safety things that you do where you do need to separate. Can you talk just a minute on that?
Sure. So often people come to see me in therapy because they're struggling. Should I stay or should I go? And, although we're sitting here talking about the value of staying together, I don't think that's always the case. I think, and what I came up with were 12 guideline questions to ask yourself, to really look, do you have things in common? Do you, the first question I asked was, is there violence in the relationship? Because I do not advocate for staying if there's abuse. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
then it kind of a bunch of questions to ask yourself to help you figure out what's in your best interest.
Yes.
Yeah, and a lot of times in these stories, like you share, that's what I loved about I love reading stories. So
Yeah.
I like reading these stories of these different situations, and all of them. There's some extreme situations where in culture today, it's like, okay, I'm out of here. And in these stories, they stay and they figure it out. They may not stay in the same house while they're figuring it out, but
Yeah.
they stay committed to the fact of, okay, like, how can we work through this? And they do the work, or set up boundaries, healthy boundaries for the other person to do the work, to be able to reestablish that relationship together.
And not all of them. I mean, in general, I am an advocate for staying together as much as possible. But sometimes, if only one person's invested in saving the relationship, it becomes really difficult.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. Check this out. Blended families can be hard at times, can't they? Have you ever said, I don't feel like me and my spouse are connecting? Or I'm bending over backwards and my stepkid still pushes me away? Or do you feel like your family's doing okay, but you'd like it to be more than okay? You want your family to level up, take it to an even stronger level.
The truth is, we're all looking for more joy and happiness in our lives. So, how do we start seeing that in our blended family? Because really, our family is the first place we should truly be enjoying and having the most fun with. So, how do you enjoy your blended family? You create more fun opportunities that your family loves doing. These are big things, they're small things, things that cost money, things that don't cost money. But the more fun you have together, the less blended family drama you'll have, which equals more joy and happiness for everyone. Now, you may be saying, yeah, but I don't know how to do that. I don't even know where to start. That's okay. We walk you through 5 fun dates you get to have with your family. These dates help you discover those fun things your family loves doing. You'll walk away with so many more great ideas and have an amazing, easy plan to make it happen and to keep it going. Plus, you get to have a lot of fun discovering all this in the process. We walk you through everything and make it really fun and easy.
So how do you enjoy your blended family? By going on these 5 dates and discovering fun in your stepfamily. You'll be so glad you did. Have more fun together and you'll see less problems. The link to get started on this amazing journey is in the show notes of this episode.
But I also am a storyteller. So I listened to patients for so many years, and I had all these stories going on in my head that during the pandemic, it was so cathartic for me to actually write them down. And, they came from me. I changed everybody's name and their professions for confidentiality, but I just felt like they flowed out of me all these years of seeing people and writing stories. And I find the hope in everyone's story and the love.
Yeah. I mean, it's real life. It may be, you're changing it up a little bit, but we can all relate to that because we all have our own story and our own journey that we're going through. And there was another part that I just thought was so interesting. And that was one of your patients that talked about the Holland versus Paris. And
Yes.
that analogy just hit me perfectly for blended families, because I know that we get these envisionments in our head of like what this relationship is supposed to look like. And it doesn't always go that way. And the way she described it, can you tell that analogy to us?
I'd love to. So I had this amazing woman who came in to see me. She was struggling about some issues in her life, but as she came in, she was an amazing mother. You could just tell how much she loved her son. But her son was autistic, and so had struggled with that. And her and her husband both did. And she said, "It's not that we don't love our son; we do." But it's like this analogy. It's like if you plan your whole life to go on this big trip to Paris, and you plan it and you buy guidebooks and you learn the language, you learn how to speak French, and you learn about French food and the fashions and the culture and where you want to go. And suddenly you're rerouted. And it's not that Holland's not a good place, but it's not where I expected to go. And you're going to meet wonderful people in Holland and take on great things about the culture, but it's just sometimes not what I expected. And so there needs to be some grieving. And I took that analogy and I just thought it was so beautifully said. That
Mhm.
for her, having a child who's on the spectrum, although she loved him and she met wonderful people along the way, and his teachers and his therapists and other parents with similar kids with similar issues, but it wasn't what she was expecting. And she had to grieve that her story
Mhm.
didn't turn out the way she thought, that her trip got rerouted. And so I thought about it, and I thought about it about how so many of us end up having our stories rerouted, whether our trips rerouted, whether we end up with an addiction or with a
Mhm.
partner who dies or has a loss, or who things don't work out the way we're expecting, or whether there's an
Mhm.
affair, or whatever the thing that reroutes us, such as a blended family, whether there's a divorce. And it's really dangerous if you just don't allow yourself to grieve and you just find the next partner, move along, and just not experience the feelings. And for me, this analogy was perfect because, oh, I shouldn't say perfect, was great because it really talked about how sometimes life doesn't turn out the way you think it's going to, and accepting what is instead of what should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how I felt because I grew up from in a just a very traumatic, we'll say, like childhood upbringing, and I just knew that I was going to change the cycle for my kids. And so then when I found myself divorced, and now I'm like, okay, this isn't what I had. But then I found him. And so then I was trying again. I kept trying to have this perfect envisionment. I was going to fix this. And when we got into our parenting in the teenage years and our kids left, and I had this whole envision of being so involved in my kids' like high school life and what that was gonna look like. And when they left and went to go live with their other parents, I seriously had to grieve that. Like, this
Yeah.
isn't going to happen. My kids don't care about prom. They don't care about high school sports and project graduations and all of these things that I thought, okay, I'm going to be the mom that's on the committees and does these things. And
Yeah.
then they weren't even here. And I even tried to pretend for a while. Do you remember that horrible story where I became like chair of project graduation and then my son didn't even show up? And so
Yes,
I'm
yes. Well,
I'm like at this lock in and he's not even there. And I'm like, I did this to myself. And I had to grieve that what I thought in my head our parenting was going to look like.
well, and it's funny because we had always wanted a son. I had always really wanted a son. And then my husband was a baseball player, and he, was this amazing athlete in high school, and just it was such a big part of him. And his son hated baseball, struck out. Just it was painful watching. And it wasn't, we finally have our boy, and he wants no parts of this. And it
Mhm.
was so different than our daughters, who were pretty athletic and were, very similar to us. And my son didn't like to read, where I'm a reader and a writer, and I had to beg him to read. And it was like, all right, you can get what you want on some levels, but it's not what you're expecting. And
Yeah.
and it's how do we accept what is, not what should be, or what our vision of perfect should be.
Yeah. I love that. And we had talked with this couple a while back, and they were talking about how their marriage was super rocky, and just really they were ready to check out. But then they got the advice to start saying yes to each other more. So they decided to go on a camping trip, and which they were completely city dwellers. Camping was far from whatever they wanted to do. Well, he was upset. He got there and was just mad because it was raining, just nasty and everything. And the next day he woke up still in this state, and his wife had said, you can choose to be happy, you can choose the circumstance that you're wanting to be in. And it was just like this brick that hit him, and it was like, you know, okay. And from then on, he changed, and he said, I'm going to choose joy. And then he found beauty in it, to where now this is what they do for a living. It restored their marriage. It's just this amazing thing. But it's that within us, to where things may not be going the way that we see it. But if we can change our mental state and turn things around, there's power in that, and see the
Mhm.
beauty in Holland, per se, right?
The beauty in things that aren't the way you thought they were going to be.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, love that. Now you talk about just we don't want to keep you forever,
No.
but I would love you talk about grieving, that we do need to grieve.
Yeah.
Now, could you maybe explain uh, what healthy grieving looks like, because sure there can be uh, good and bad of anything, and I can imagine there's bad ways to grieve, and then there's good, better, healthier ways to grieve. Could you maybe explain some of that, maybe?
Sure. So I want to talk to you about grieving and how, for me, we all, when somebody dies, we all honor that. Everybody knows about when somebody dies. There's a funeral. People are speaking. In a lot of religions, people bring over food and they, send you cards, and there's acknowledgement, and people are, calling and checking in. How are you doing? Your loss is very apparent.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes there's another type of grief called ambiguous grief, where other people might not know about it. So you may have something that you're struggling with, such as a separation, such as a divorce, such as a loss, with your child not being the way you thought he'd be, whether it be a learning disability, whether it be having a family member who's experiencing an illness. Whatever it is, there may be things that aren't as public, or suffering from a spouse who's had an affair, and you're grieving and you're really sad, but it's not honored or celebrated by other people. And so that's kind of this ambiguous grief, and that sticks with you and freezes inside of you, and that becomes unhealthy. So it's important to have outlets where you can talk about it, so it doesn't somaticize, so it doesn't become a pain in your body. It doesn't come as you being depressed or anxious or just having headaches or backaches. It's really important to be able to have a therapist at that point, or have, go to a support group, or have a place to really go and pray and just work through some of the sadness you're carrying.
Yes. Oh, so good. And that's great advice, because that is, a lot of times, we can be, I think we call it quiet suffering or suffering in silence. And just great advice to be able to say, you know what, you need to be able to talk about it. You need to be able to share. That way you can start working through it instead of trying to do it on your own, that you're just going to continue sitting there suffering. Well, we love this book, and we know that this book right here is going to be just a amazing resource for marriages in general, but especially for blended families as well, because there's no perfect love. And I love how you say that you got to self-reflect. You've got to kind of look at your own patterns and really say, what are my triggers? you know what's triggering me, and then not suffer in silence, but actually look for help. Maybe it is going to therapy, or maybe it's talking with a pastor or a support group, or someone who's been there, done that, or something like that. But getting help and knowing that you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
So such great advice.
Right. I'm so glad. It was hard during the pandemic when so many people wanted therapy, and there were so many people who were struggling with feelings, and it's like, you only have so many hours in the day. So for me, it was really helpful to write down what I've been doing, and to have my stories, and trying to provide hope and help for people on a larger scale. So that's one of the main reasons I wrote this, to really get my own stories out, to get the stories of my patients, and to inspire people. So even if you can't afford therapy, or you can't get therapy at this point of your life, or if it's hard to get an appointment with a therapist, I wanted to give the readers something they can do practically, so that they can start on their path of healing.
And I do love that you have that in the book, that at the end of each chapter, you have these exercises and that you ask these hard questions. And we can, like, a lot of the stuff that I learned in therapy, the breakthroughs that I had wasn't even actually in therapy. It was when I was off on my own and I was praying and I was just self-reflecting. And really, I just kept asking myself, why? Why does this make me so mad? Or why does this make me so sad? And I just kept asking why until I would figure out, like, what the heck was going on deep inside. And so I love that you have those questions there. So it's not just something to read and to ponder on, but to ask yourselves, and really you get to see it lived out in other people's stories, so you can make that connection with that and be like, oh, okay, I see what I'm doing there. Yeah. Okay. So tell us, where can they get your book?
Sure. So you can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, even some indie bookstores. Anywhere where you normally get your books, it's
Okay.
Okay.
available. Amazon's the big one.
The
Yeah.
easy one because it ships right to your house. Yeah.
And where can our listeners follow you? Are you on social media, or you have a website, or?
You know what? It's so funny because in my book, I'm talking about some of the dangers of social media. Yet I'm trying to have a social media presence. Talk about a little hypocritical, but
It's kind of business nowadays, though, isn't it?
I know. And I am now on Instagram at Dr. Alyson Nerenberg and on Facebook. And I have a website, www.healingrelationshipspa.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and just sharing your wisdom
Yeah.
with us. We appreciate you.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate the two of you, and I wish you nothing but good things going forward. And I know you're making a difference to so many families.
Oh, well,
Oh,
thank you so
Yes, I
much.
appreciate that.
And Blended Family Community, I know you have just walked away with a lot of wisdom. You're like, oh my goodness. Okay. So, we know now that if we're struggling in our marriage, maybe start with us, maybe start with yourself and say, well, why am I struggling? What
Mhm.
is really going on? What are my triggers? What are my patterns that are going on? And maybe there's some things that you can work through, and maybe there's some things that aren't, or maybe you might need to reach out and find a therapist or get good resources like this book
Mhm.
that can help walk and ask questions. Because truthfully, we should all have just a happy life. We should all look for enjoyment. Is everything going to be perfect? No. There is no perfect love, but there is a great God that we serve.
Perfect is boring.
Perfect
I think
is
our
boring.
messiness is what keeps us interesting. No,
That is so true.
yes, no interesting person has ever had an easy life. So I
Yeah.
think in a way our struggles are what keep us interesting. And I love your takeaways from our talk.
Yes, and this is like free therapy, okay, guys? You just got 30 minutes with a counselor, free therapy. So now you got to do your therapy work.
But you're so right. Life would be boring. I can think of some of those movies to where it's like you walk around, everything's perfect. And it's like, oh my God, get me out of here now.
Yeah.
But the challenges and struggles help make us who we are, as long as we see it as that, as long as we can turn it around and we can look for the joy in it, and we can look for our self growth. How can we become better people, better humans from this? Because whenever we can approach life that way, and we can approach challenges that way, when we can approach our marriage that way, you find so much beauty in it. So it's so good. So good. So y'all have got to go get this book. We're going to put all the links down there in the show notes so that you got access. But be sure to connect with Dr. Alyson. Get this book. It is a beautiful thing, but we want your marriage to be wonderful. We want you to see it not as perfect, because it never will be, but we want you to see it as you're life partners doing life together. You got each other's back, and you're going at it full throttle, just loving life. So we love
Yes.
you. And remember to enjoy your blended family, and we will see you on the next episode. Bye, guys.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope this episode has been a blessing and encouraged your family journey.
Make sure you stay connected with us and join our weekly Blended Family newsletter. We send an email out every Friday morning full of support and encouragement.
And when you join, we also want to give you a free gift. So go get yours today. The link is in the show notes below.
Have an amazing day. Remember to enjoy the journey with your blended family, and we'll see you on the next episode.